When Sharon Osbourne arranged for her husband to visit a British Army base, she had one special request: treat him like any other civilian visitor. No red carpet, no special protocol. The young soldiers saw an elderly man in casual clothes and thought they were babysitting a harmless celebrity. But what they didn't know was that this harmless visitor had secrets that would completely shatter their assumptions and deliver the most powerful lesson about respect. In the Osbourne home in Beverly Hills, Sharon was presenting her husband with a special offer over breakfast that morning. "Ozzy, darling, I've got something that might interest you," she said, placing the official envelope on the table. "The British Army wants you to visit their training center for a morale boost." Apparently, some of the young soldiers are huge fans. Ozzy looked skeptically over his coffee. "Sharon, I'm 74. What am I supposed to do? Sing them a lullaby?" Sharon laughed. "Actually, they want you to try some of their equipment, maybe share some stories. Think of it as a day out." Ozzy's eyes lit up. "Equipment? You mean like proper military stuff?" Sharon nodded. "Within reason, of course. But yes, the real deal." This offer excited Ozzy because he had always been curious about military technology in his younger years. "All right then, I'll do it. But if I come back speaking like a drill sergeant, it's your fault." When he arrived at the Salisbury Plain Military Training Center, Ozzy was in his typical appearance: faded blue jeans, black t-shirt, and that familiar leather jacket. While waiting at the security gate, Colonel James Mitchell came to greet him. "Mr. Osbourne, welcome to our facility. I must say, it's quite an honor having you here," he said with a formal manner. Ozzy extended his hand. "Thank you, Colonel. And please, call me Ozzy. Mr. Osbourne makes me feel like I should be wearing a suit." Mitchell laughed. "Understood. I should mention, our lads are quite excited. Some of them have been listening to Black Sabbath since they were teenagers." Ozzy joked. "Bloody hell, that makes me feel ancient." "Are you sure they're old enough to be soldiers?" Mitchell's expression became slightly more serious. "Actually, sir, that's part of why your visit is so important. Some of our younger recruits, well, they could use some perspective on what real experience looks like." What Colonel Mitchell didn't reveal was that several young soldiers had been making jokes about some old rocker coming to visit. They expected someone past his prime, maybe even struggling to keep up. They had no idea they were about to meet someone who'd survived decades of challenges that would break most people. When they arrived at the training area, 5 young soldiers were waiting ready. Sergeant Michael Thompson, 26 years old, muscular and confident. Beside him was Staff Sergeant David Harris, 24 years old, sharp intelligence and an even sharper tongue. 3 young privates: Private Jake Morrison, 22 years old, Private Sam Wilson, 23 years old, and Private Luke Bennett, 21 years old. All were fit, energetic, and looked slightly surprised when they saw Ozzy. Sergeant Thompson stepped forward. "Sir, welcome to our demonstration area. We've prepared some basic equipment for you to try." His voice was respectful, but there was slight doubt in his eyes. Ozzy looked around. "Basic? Come on, lads. I didn't come here to play with toy guns. What's the real stuff?" Staff Sergeant Harris grinned. "Well, sir, we thought we'd start you off gently. Don't want any mishaps." After this comment, the other soldiers exchanged secretive glances. Jake Morrison approached his friends and whispered quietly, "Think he can even lift a proper rifle?" Sam Wilson replied, "My granddad's probably fitter than this guy." Luke Bennett added, "Yeah, but hey, at least he's trying." Sergeant Thompson, who overheard these conversations, quietly warned the group, but he too had doubts about Ozzy's age. Ozzy was aware of the situation, but didn't let it show. Years of stage experience had taught him to read all kinds of audience reactions. "Right then, lads," he said in that familiar Birmingham accent. "What have you got that might challenge an old rocker?" But here's where the story takes its first shocking turn. Because what these soldiers didn't know was that Ozzy had actually received professional firearms training during his 1983 tour supporting British forces in Northern Ireland. The training was classified for security reasons and had never been made public. When they moved to the demonstration stage, Sergeant Thompson began introducing an SA-80 assault rifle. "This is our standard service rifle, sir. Semi-automatic 5.56mm caliber. Effective range about 400 meters. His voice was instructional but somewhat patronizing. Ozzy approached the weapon. May I? Sergeant Thompson hesitated. Well, sir, it's not exactly a guitar. Are you sure you're comfortable with… When Ozzy took the weapon, his movement suddenly changed. He performed safety checks, examined the magazine, checked that the barrel was clean. These movements were so natural and professional that the soldiers' surprised looks found each other. Bloody hell, Staff Sergeant Harris muttered. He knows what he's doing. Jake Morrison's mouth hung open. Where did he learn that? When Ozzy took his stance, he displayed perfect shooting position. Now this, he said with a smile, takes me back. The first shot was a perfect hit, right in the center of the target. The second shot, same place. Third, fourth. Every shot was flawless. The soldiers' joking attitudes gave way to shocked silence. Sam Wilson's voice trembled. Sir, that's extraordinary accuracy. Luke Bennett added, I've been training for 2 years and I can't shoot like that. Sergeant Thompson approached. Mr. Osbourne, with respect, where did you learn to shoot like a professional marksman? Ozzy brought the weapon to safe position. Well, lads, when you've performed in some interesting places over the years, you pick up a few skills. Northern Ireland, Falkland support concerts. Military advisors thought it might be wise if I knew how to protect myself. Staff Sergeant Harris's voice had changed. Sir, you've been to combat zones? Ozzy humbly replied, Not as a soldier, mind you. Just entertaining the troops. But when you're in a hostile environment, the lads in uniform make sure you can handle yourself if things go sideways. Jake Morrison stepped forward bashfully. Sir, I owe you an apology. We didn't take you seriously at first. Ozzy put his hand on Jake's shoulder. Son, you weren't being disrespectful. You were being realistic. Look at me. I'm an old bloke in a faded t-shirt. Your training tells you to assess threats and capabilities. You did exactly what you should have done. Sam Wilson hesitantly asked, But we were wrong, weren't we? Ozzy laughed. Not wrong, just incomplete in your information. That's different. In combat, you make decisions based on available intel. Today you learned that intel can be misleading. These words had put the soldiers at ease. Luke Bennett curiously asked, Sir, what other skills do you have that we wouldn't expect? A mischievous glint appeared in Ozzy's eyes. Well, I can also make a mean cup of tea, change a tire in the rain, and according to Sharon, I'm absolutely brilliant at ignoring good advice. Sergeant Thompson became serious. Sir, what's the most important thing military advisors taught you? Ozzy thought, that survival isn't about being the strongest or the fastest. It's about adapting, thinking clearly under pressure, and never underestimating anyone, friend or enemy. Staff Sergeant Harris, what do you mean by never underestimating? Ozzy's expression reflected the wisdom of an experienced person. I remember in Belfast, there was this old lady who ran a tea shop. Looked harmless as a butterfly. Turned out she was feeding information to 5 different intelligence services. Everyone underestimated her because she was elderly and female. Dangerous mistake. Jake Morrison asked, So appearance means nothing? Ozzy simply replied, Appearance tells you something, but it's just the opening chapter of the book. The real story is always deeper. Sam Wilson added, How do we learn to see the real story? Ozzy smiled. By listening more than you talk, asking questions instead of making assumptions, and remembering that everyone you meet has survived, something that could have destroyed them. Colonel Mitchell had been impressed listening to this dialogue. He approached and asked, Mr. Osbourne, our young soldiers could benefit greatly from your perspective. Would you consider speaking to a larger group? Ozzy happily replied, I'd be honored, Colonel, but only if these lads here can introduce me. After all, they've earned the right through their honesty. Sergeant Thompson's face glowed with pride. Sir, it would be our privilege. But the most powerful moment was yet to come. Because when Ozzy addressed the entire battalion, what he said would become the subject of discussion in military circles for months to come, and would fundamentally change how these soldiers approached their duties. In the large conference hall, when 200 soldiers had gathered, Sergeant Thompson stepped up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the honor of hosting Mr. Ozzy Osbourne today. But before he speaks, I want to share something with you. An hour ago, we looked at this man and saw someone old and inexperienced. We thought we needed to treat him gently. Now we realize how wrong we were. There was silence in the hall. Mr. Osbourne didn't just meet our expectations. He shattered them completely. He showed us that experience comes in many forms, and wisdom doesn't always wear a uniform. Sergeant Thompson turned to Ozzy. Sir, the stage is yours. As Ozzy stepped up to the microphone, he displayed that familiar, calm but authoritative stance. Thank you, Sergeant Thompson. You know, when I walked in here today, I saw something in your eyes that I've seen in audiences all over the world. Skepticism. And you know what? Good on you for having it. Skepticism keeps you alive, Ozzy continued. But so does keeping an open mind. I've learned that the most dangerous person in any room isn't necessarily the biggest or the loudest. It's the one you dismiss too quickly. The soldiers in the hall listened attentively. I've performed for troops in some very interesting places over the years. Belfast during the Troubles, Falklands support missions, Bosnia. In every location, I met soldiers who taught me something about courage, adaptation, and survival. In Northern Ireland, I learned that real warriors don't just know how to fight, they know when not to fight. They understand that sometimes the greatest victory is preventing a battle from starting. Jake Morrison was confused. But sir, we're trained to be ready for combat. Ozzy replied, Absolutely, son. But being ready for war and looking for war are two very different things. The best soldiers I've met were those who hoped they'd never have to use their training, but were perfectly prepared if they did. Sam Wilson courageously asked, Sir, when you were in those dangerous situations, what kept you going? The shadow of old memories appeared in Ozzy's eyes. Music, mate. Not just performing it, but remembering why it mattered. In Belfast, I saw a young soldier humming Iron Man while he cleaned his rifle. That song wasn't just entertainment for him, it was a reminder of home, of something bigger than the fear. Luke Bennett curiously asked, But how does music help in real combat? Ozzy became serious. Because music connects you to your humanity when everything around you is trying to strip it away. The worst thing that can happen to a soldier isn't getting shot, it's forgetting why you're fighting in the first place. Staff Sergeant Harris added, And what are we fighting for, sir? Ozzy's answer was simple but powerful. For the right of some kid to listen to terrible music too loud in his bedroom without fear. For the right of families to argue over Sunday dinner. For all the beautiful, messy, ordinary things that make life worth living. Colonel Mitchell felt the atmosphere in the hall had changed. These words touched on something much deeper than just military strategy. Let me tell you something about real courage, Ozzy continued. It's not about never being afraid. I've been terrified more times than I can count. Real courage is doing what needs to be done while you're scared shitless. The hall chuckled quietly. The bravest people I know, and that includes many of you in this room, are those who face their fears every day and still show up for duty. Sergeant Thompson curiously asked, Sir, how do we handle fear in combat situations? Ozzy was getting into his stride. First, accept that fear is normal. Anyone who says they're not afraid is either lying or hasn't been in a real situation yet. Use that fear. It sharpens your senses, makes you more alert, but don't let it control you. As the session was winding down, something unexpected happened. Colonel Mitchell stood up. Mr. Osbourne, our soldiers have one final request. They'd like to hear you perform something, anything, before you leave. The hall suddenly fell silent, everyone waiting for Ozzy's reaction. Ozzy was surprised. Lads, I didn't bring any equipment. How am I supposed to? Sergeant Thompson stepped forward. Sir, we don't need fancy equipment. Just your voice, maybe something that meant a lot to the soldiers you performed for. Ozzy thought for a moment, then smiled. All right then, but you lads have to sing along when you know the words. Then, without a microphone, using only his own voice, he began singing the opening lines of Mama, I'm Coming Home. The 200 soldiers in the hall joined him from the first line, and at that moment, an ordinary visit transformed into an unforgettable experience. When the song ended, the applause lasted for minutes. But what was truly surprising was the change in the young soldier's eyes. Sergeant Thompson approached Ozzy. "Sir, I have to ask something that's been bothering me. Why didn't you embarrass us when we underestimated you? You could have made us look like complete fools." Ozzy's response was typical Ozzy style. "Sergeant Thompson, embarrassing young soldiers doesn't make me a bigger man. It makes me a smaller one. Besides, you lads showed respect even when you had doubts. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." Colonel Mitchell had one final surprise. As Ozzy was leaving, he presented him with a special gift, one of the Army's most prestigious awards, the Honorary Regiment Challenge Coin. "Mr. Osbourne, this is for services to military morale. You've done more for these soldiers' understanding of leadership in one afternoon than most training exercises achieve in weeks." As Ozzy turned the medal over in his hands, his eyes welled up. "Colonel, this means more to me than any Grammy Award ever could. These lads will be protecting our future. Helping shape their character is the greatest honor I could ask for." Staff Sergeant Harris approached shyly. "Sir, we'll never forget today. You showed us that real strength comes from experience and wisdom, not just physical training." Ozzy smiled. "And you lads showed me that the future of Britain is in very good hands indeed." As Ozzy left the base, he left behind not just impressed soldiers, but young men with a completely changed worldview. Jake Morrison was still in amazement. The way he held that rifle, his shooting position, he had professional-level training. We were treating him like some old grandpa. Sam Wilson was thoughtful, but the most impressive part wasn't his weapon handling. He never showed arrogance. Quite the opposite, he treated us with respect. Luke Bennett's voice was serious and determined as he spoke his final words. "From now on, I'll never judge anyone by their appearance. Every person has a story behind them, and that story is worth listening to." That day at the base, something far more valuable than weapons training had been learned, that real strength is not arrogance, but humility, not destruction, but building up. And Ozzy Osbourne returned to his wife Sharon with the joy of having given one of the most meaningful lessons of his life.